Welcome to the Takeaways podcast. On today's episode, I'm with Lindsey Schutters. He's a business journalist at the Daily Maverick, where he believes that every story is either a technology or an engineering story. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the tech stories that really dominated the headlines in technology in Mzansi. Welcome to the Takeaways podcast. It's great to finally have you here.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of everything that you've done so far in your career. And it's a complete honor. And how about 2025, though? It's the year that just never stopped. It was relentless.
Yeah, true, man. Like, a lot happened, and you have spent the entire year reporting on the tech and business stories. So this episode is really about you stepping back and giving us the context beyond just the headlines and the press releases, right? So before we dive in, right, when you think back of 2025 as a whole, what kind of year do you think it was for tech in Mzansi?
Wow. Obviously, it was all dominated by the tariffs talks. It was crazy. I did the wrap-up video for just the business year, and everything up until like April was already insane, and then it just got crazier. But there were a couple of major kind of breakthroughs where I feel that Africa, or at least the continent as a whole, is finally like catching up with the rest of the world, and we drawing level on a lot of services and technologies that are available in our market, especially like with the AI thing, because that was pretty much 2025 was just AI madness.
When we dive into the stories, I'm going to start off with Starlink, right? I mean, I think that was probably the loudest tech story of 2025, right? Because I think it went beyond just being, like a conversation on technology, right? It became, like a political issue. It became a regulatory issue, etc., etc. From your perspective, as a journalist, and you have written quite extensively on this, why do you think this story became just so, like explosive?
Well, besides for like the ideological stuff and whatever you feel about Elon Musk, and especially like being a son of South Africa, there were a lot of feelings about a lot of it. But what I try to express in a lot of my writing is that the nation of South Africa and any sovereign nation, you, the taxpayers, own the airwaves. So if anybody wants to broadcast or send things over the air, over the radio signals, on the internet highways of your airspace, they need to play by the rules of the taxpayer. And unfortunately, and fortunately for redress and for all those things, South Africa has very clear rules that if you want to be playing in those spaces, you need to set up shop in South Africa and have 30% local ownership, preferably black ownership, but it was local ownership. And then that opened a whole can of worms with opposition parties, or at least, well, we don't have opposition parties anymore because we have government of national unity. But like the policymakers in the DA, and they called me out directly, and my editor even published that story, where the Institute of Race Relations then used the Starlink licensing deal as a platform just to launch an all-out attack on our broad-based black economic empowerment laws. And my argument was always, if they want to transmit information in South African airspace, they have to play by South African rules. And that's always been the bottom line.
In terms of the protagonist of the story, I mean, we have the world's richest man who is like the owner of SpaceX, obviously. Do you think his, like his public posture and his comments on other issues on South Africa had kind of like an impact on the whole issue?
It kind of did. Like it definitely gave a weird edge to the story where it started to drift into like ideological and like political kind of debating, and then like the whole refugee situation and the supposed white genocide that's going on in South Africa. Like that all erupted around this, and then it was just a weird, it was one of those breakout stories where every single time. Like, again, like Solly Malatsi, I have a very good relationship with Solly Malatsi. I think he's a great guy. We've had numerous conversations. But then he'll just like sneak through. Like now, on the 19th of December, when everyone was kind of, I had lit my braai fire already. And then I got a SMS, or at least a WhatsApp message from the PR agency for that kind of deals with SpaceX in South Africa. Or at least they invited me to the Africa Tech Festival, the fireside chat that Ryan Goodnight had. They sent me the policy directive that was published in the National Gazette, in the Government Gazette. And like an hour later, the Department of Communications and Digital Technology sent it to me. And I was like, okay, fine. Surely the one should have come before the other one. And then that kind of became the story. And then it's just him trying to direct ICASA, which is an independent organization, which he should not be meddling there. And I've had this conversation with him face to face. And he just keeps scratching that itch, and I don't understand it.
In terms of the directive, I mean, that's where we are at the moment, right? What message do you think it sends with regards to the regulatory independence of ICASA?
I think the regulators' hands are pretty tied right now. Like, they are damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. Because the way he's structured... So, like, I have nothing wrong... Like, I have no issue with the policy that he's trying to push through, which is like an equity policy where the company invests equivalent funds to what would be a 30% like ownership, and they invest it into like social upliftment and infrastructure projects and all that sort of stuff. Funny thing though, Starlink doesn't have physical infrastructure. So like if they were actually employing South Africans to like build and like dig trenches and lay fiber and all that sort of stuff, great, but they don't have those things. So it's a really, really nice bit of policy making just on that side. But the way the directive is being implemented is he found a loophole in the Electronic Communications Act where they should allow, ICASA should allow equity equivalent investment programs in lieu of broad-based black economic empowerment regulations. But that then becomes a Department of Trade and competition. So when Vodacom and Massive wanted to merge, because Massive and Vumatel said that they couldn't roll out their township fiber because they were so poor and they needed Vodacom's money, and Vodacom needed like fiber infrastructure footprint, Solly Malatsi also tried to push it through. He was trying to direct the Competition Commission to find in its favor. And then he also went to his homie Parks Tau at the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And they double teamed the Competition Tribunal. And then that deal got over the line. So this is almost the same playbook, just with like different law applications where now the Department of Trade, so Parks Tau needs to decide whether to apply the equity equivalent investment program. And ICASA kind of just has to rubber stamp the deal, which obviously Parliament is not happy with this because you need to do a lot more law changes to get that kind of thing over the line, man.
Yeah. And then, at the moment, it feels like, like it's advantage Starlink, right?
Yes.
Do you agree that they currently have like an upper hand in the issue?
Yes, they do. They totally do. But I believe that the Portfolio Committee is going to summons the Minister to Parliament to please explain. And I don't think they're going to allow for a completely different department to then overrule what an independent commission is supposed to be doing. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting start to 2026.
As we head into the new year, obviously, I don't think the licensing process is going to just take a year. But, like in 2026 and, like into 2027, do you see Starlink eventually being able to get a license in South Africa?
I think they're going to come through a back door. So they already have the continental kind of agreement with Vodacom, where they basically roaming on like Vodacom spectrum, and like that's for me, is the ultimate play. Like I even asked when I met him at Africa Tech Festival, I asked Ryan Goodnight, like, why don't you guys set up like a license co or maybe partner with one of the existing mobile network operators and then just like piggyback on whatever ownership structures that they have. Because even for licensing co, just to get like the spectrum allocation, you could have a fully South African black-owned entity with shareholders or at least with directors just to hold the license agreement. That's how MultiChoice, the Canal Plus deal with MultiChoice, they set up a license co for that specific reason. And 30% of the equity of the business sits with the license co. And the license co controls all of the spectrum and frequency licensing. I don't understand why they would not do that. And I figure that that's how it's going to end up. But I don't see any benefit to Starlink, to be honest, because there was that ENCA, Annika Larson went to Zimbabwe to go check the speeds. And the one clip that I was absolutely hosing myself, where she's like at this youth center and they have Starlink there and the guy's like, oh, look how fast this internet is. And it was like 12 megabits per second.
Yeah, that was the concluding question I had. That do you think the value proposition of Starlink is worth all this trouble and drama that's currently going on for the licensing?
Look, who's going to benefit? That's going to be the farmers out in rural South Africa who can afford to pay 1,000 Rand a month for fine internet. Let's just call it fine. That sometimes goes down when there's a thunderstorm because of physics. I think if we turn the screws on our mobile network operators and they have to actually trench out fiber backhaul into rural South Africa to the villages and employ local people to erect masts on top of, like actually do the hard work of rolling out a physical, far superior and more reliable network, that would be awesome. I think Starlink, they just in it too. I don't even know. I don't even know why. But I just want the village to get employed instead of just a data, like Sky Internet coming to the village and then just serving them ads and selling them things that they don't need for money that they don't have.
Another trend, like in tech in South Africa in 2025 that really, was in the headlines is stablecoins. I mean, in the second half of 2025, it became impossible to go a week without hearing, like a business talking about they're launching a stablecoin product, right? So, to start with, why stablecoins and why now?
Because people don't want to pay bank fees. That's the bottom line. People don't want to pay bank fees. They want to send money around the globe fast, and they don't want any of that to be eaten up by bank fees, arbitrage, like all those kinds of things. So as a technology to move money around, I think stablecoins are definitely going to entrench themselves. And the banks obviously don't want this because like half of their business is just taking fees from you to move money or to hold money. But yeah, there's a lot of like little things. Like, oh man, we had another Rand-pegged stablecoin launch, but this was done by Supergroup, which is the holding company for Betway. They partnered with Luno, and I actually spoke to Christo from Luno about this, and I was like, how did you guys like partner with us? Because just like hear me out, right? So Betway has a problem. They don't like paying out money. So what do? They do a in-game currency. So if you win Betway dollars or whatever, they don't have to pay that out to you. It just stays in the game. It's like V-Bucks or what's the other like whatever. Like if you're on Fortnite, you know what I'm talking about. Like if you're on Roblox, like Robux, it's the same thing. You trading your money for in-game currency, and then they don't have to pay you out, and then they can just hold all that money in the bank and take all the interest off of that and like use it however else they use it. But they are now saying, but it's a stable coin that everyone can use, but it's a betting token. Where they're just taking money from you. So that's a bad stable coin. But like the USDCs and those kinds of things are pegged, like dollar pegged stuff. I haven't seen a good idea for a rand pegged stablecoin. And yeah, I also have other feelings about stablecoins, man.
You mentioned that, like in terms of banks, stable coins are kind of, like a disruptor to the model they have, where they charge, they make like a lot from the fees and everything, right? But you have banks, like your ABSA, which launched, like a digital custody, and that involves like stable coins also. But that's more, like of like a CIB product, is not really a retail product. If we go into 2026, do you see more of like a trend of these kind of like products from banks?
Yeah. I see a lot more like my money kind of things that are going to come out. I think like South Africa has been very slow on wallets and like digital like transactions, and I think there's going to be a big market open for that will be based on some variation of a stablecoin. So the problem with USDC, for instance, so Circle, is that their proof of reserve is Bitcoin and a bit of gold and a bit of treasury bonds and a bit of cash. And it's like, how stable is a stable coin that is propped up by Bitcoin that is like super volatile, and then now by the dollar in like a de-dollarization kind of trend, where there's like big kind of off sales. But then there's like these interesting little quirks that have come out. So there's a BRICS currency kind of stable coin that's being devised, like just more like a single currency for internal like BRICS transactions, which is then backed by like fractional reserves of the various countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So fractionalized on their reserves, and then a large percentage of that backed by gold, which has then been digitized, tokenized. And it's a very interesting hybrid model that I think it might have legs, purely because we're moving away from a dollar-backed kind of currency, and then not putting all of our eggs on like one country's currency, one fiat. So there's like a decent reserve. So yeah, I think that's kind of the future. So we're going to see a lot more products like that. As banks are playing around with tokenizing like various different assets. So we'll see more financial products. But yeah, man, like I still want to see people actually own crypto and not like have it held in custody by an institution that could change the rules on you whenever.
In terms of the regulatory environment, the governor of the central bank, he was speaking to CNBC, I believe, 2 months back, and his concern was that, in terms of stable coins, there is a possibility that they can be used to short the rand, etc. Do you think this is a valid concern, and do you think it's going to lead to kind of more of like a stricter stance on stable coins as we head into 2026?
I think in the retail space, or at least in the private space, I think it's going to become quite acceptable. But I think there's a lot of regulations that are going to come in very quickly just to keep the corporates at bay, so that we don't have like mass kind of capital flight and then that shorting of the rand and all that stuff. So I think we're going to end up with like a two-tier regulation where you're going to hit certain limits that you can send, and when you're above that, and they're going to be working hand in hand with SARS, where they're going to be tracking exactly what you're doing. So it's like if you're sending money like home or wherever, if you're in the diaspora, that will be fine. But if you like a business trying to like arbitrage or like do some dodgy stuff, you're going to get shut down really quickly.
The bank has also been, really trying to promote, like in terms of payments, like if you look at the whole thing, with Pay Inc., etc., etc., they seem to be more of like have like a liberal stance with regards to that. Do you think there's like a balance to strike in? Okay, how do we, as the bank, try to promote the smoothing of payments, but also like ensuring that the risks that comes with like stable coins and other like of the digital assets don't outdo the good things?
Yeah, man, digital banking and like the payments thing. So I had an interesting conversation with one of the guys leading payments for Pick and Pay, and he was saying like the cost of banking for them is like pretty insane. So with all of these different payment, that's why they just accept everything. So you can pay with Bitcoin, you can pay like with QR codes, like everything at Pick and Pay, because it brings down their overheads like so much. And I think the banks are seeing that their customers are enjoying this kind of thing, and then you don't need to like pay the security guys when you're changing money at the ATMs or like all of those. Like there's a lot of little costs that the banks are trying to erase off of their balance sheet. But the flip side of that is in the informal economy, which is still very much cash based, where you need a lot of liberalization of cash and not like full on like tracking of people. Digital banking for me, like at least wanting to bank the unbanked is more so that you can harvest the data and then build products on top of that to make the bank rich and not really help the citizens. So yeah, I like to remain kind of neutral and like keep arm's length from there just to see the benefits of technology versus like why these institutions are now trying to like push this. I'm a bit paranoid about the surveillance state, and I think like just having everyone have a bank account and like using just digital payments is like super surveillance state.
To dive into that more, and that's the last news that I think was really like important, like in South Africa over the course of the year.
Yeah.
Like it's digital banking, where you had like a Revolut trying to come into South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
You have like Time Back, which raised like an incredible amount of money. It feels like it's the new like a battleground, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the new players, like your startups and and the big four banks. If you look at the competition and the competitive advantage of each party, where would you say the most advantage is? Is it with the new players or is it with the big four?
At the moment, no one is outdoing Capitec. That's just the truth in this market. Like they are coming for everybody. So it's very much still advantage banks, traditional banks. The startup guys are coming in, but everyone's kind of playing for the same thing right now. So it's either like smooth remittance, low fees kind on that side, or it's easy access to micro lending. So buy now, pay later, like all those kinds of things. And it's a bit, I had this conversation with Carl Westwig from Time Bank, where all of the like Department of Home Affairs stuff came through, and then they upped their rate for the instant verifications. And then I asked him in the conversation afterwards, because he was very upset that I didn't like praise them. I don't know why. And then I asked him, I was like, so you now roll out this whole thing, and how far is Time Bank from becoming a loan book business? Because Capitec is a loan book business. They started out like that. That's how they make their money. They want to get you in and then push you up the lending ladder. And he said they will never do it. And I'm not even kidding you. A week later, they bought out that Sanlam joint venture loan book that they had. And then I was like, my guy, you just want to be selling dodgy credit to like people. And even Optasia comes in, and they like algorithmically driven micro lending business. And it's actually quite sickening that they say that they granting like access to like finance and all this stuff, but you're just putting people in a debt trap.
These platforms, I mean, like I've already given an example of your Bank Zero, like your Time Back, your Revolut. They are coming hard, like into South Africa. What's the attraction there? Like, why are they like kind of trying to double down on South Africa?
Because there's money, and there's like there's an emerging class that isn't beholden to the legacy infrastructure. They're not getting trust funds that were kept at like Coronation Fund or whatever. They just hustling, getting paid week to week, and they just need a bank account so that they can interact in this digital economy that we're building now with this cash-free kind of vibe. and tapping to pay wherever and just like buying things online and this hyper consumerism. That's the draw card, because unfortunately South Africa is what's it now, 64% of our GDP is consumer spending, and the Minister of Finance is like, we need to push that a little bit higher to like 70%. So we're looking at like 2/3 of the economy is just consumers buying stuff. It's crazy.
If we look at where the regulatory environment is, I mean, at the beginning of the year, we had the whole issue between, the Home Affairs and Time Bank, right? In terms of the regulatory environment, do you see the other players also having like a pushback from the regulators? Or even if it's not, like a pushback, but they don't see eye to eye, like the whole issue between Time Bank and Home Affairs?
So a lot of that, like there's all this foundation being laid down for digital public infrastructure, DPI, so when I was in Estonia earlier this year, it kind of dawned on me that is exactly where South Africa is moving, where you have this common data repository, and then all the institutions can access it through secure channels, but you need a digitalized identity, broad-based identity system where the person, the individual, is in control of their data. So you decide whether you want this company to access your data or not. And like, that's the end point for all of this. And it's going to take a lot of growing pains, because like our medical records, you go into Baragwanath Hospital in Joburg, and there's still files, like boxes and boxes of patient files stacked to the ceilings in one of the rooms. And if you want to know something about a patient history, you need to like wait a week before they locate like the folder in there. So we need to digitize a lot of those things, and that's going to cost a lot of money. And unfortunately, character recognition with the current crop of like AI that we have is not good enough for that yet. So we're going to have to like have a lot more development on that side, just so we can get the data processing going. So it's going to be more Time Bank versus Department of Home Affairs kind of fights, where the cost of getting us to where we want to be or need to be as a society, as a digital society, is going to be so high that I think a lot of the smaller guys are either going to get shaken out, and then Capitec's just going to take everything.
As we head into 2026, right, how do you see the landscape of digital banking evolving? Do you see more players coming in? I mean, we have, like a new bank who took part in the round of Time Bank, etc. Do you see more players coming in, or do you see more of like a consolidation of the current players where like others get bought through like an M&A, etc., etc.? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, I foresee a lot of deals going through where the big guys are just, it's going to be easier to just buy up market share. If you can't build the thing in-house, you just buy it as it is. But I think there's a lot more room, especially on the regulation side, around this whole data privacy and like screen scraping and like those kinds of things, where we need faster mechanisms of verification. And I think that's going to be the next kind of innovation niche, because we have Peach Payments that is doing very well in terms of interfacing with like Google Pay and like Apple Pay and that sort of thing. But for people outside of that kind of ecosystem, we're going to need faster verification, just so that you can have smoother transactions. Because like Apple Pay, for instance, does all of like the bank has an agreement with Apple, and Apple is like, yeah, we can tell you that this is the person doing the payment, so you can just like give us the tokens and we'll sort it out. But for all of the other things like QR codes and like those things, just to speed up knowing that like the KYC of it all, that's where we need to close the gap.
We have spoken, like extensively on the headline stories of 2025, but I want to move to you. I mean, you write extensively on a lot of issues that, might not be able to become a mainstream kind of conversation. So I want to ask you, right, from the stories that you have reported on, can you give me 2 or 3 which really stood out to you?
Definitely the Alan Knott Craig's hero arc was something I didn't see coming. What's it called? Fiber Time is his little township kind of fiber internet company, where they spending quite a lot of money. So like to connect one household with a router UPS to a fiber connection is like 5,000 rand per connection right now, and they just eating all of those costs because like their blockchain technology is awesome, where they sell you like 24 hours of internet at like a 5 rand bundle. So each block on the chain is like a 5 rand thing, and they're just selling you time. And then you can use that wherever you connect to like the Wi-Fi or whatever, but it's also locked to your IP address, your MAC address, so the device's MAC address. So you need a different voucher like for your laptop and for your phone and for your smart TV and that sort of thing. So like that's pretty cool. And then there's like just staying like on interesting, because like I went most of 2025 trying to find blockchain startups or Web3 startups that were actually solving problems that we haven't solved with like traditional accounting. So like Fiber Time was the one, and then there's this other like marketing crowd that I still need to do a lot more reporting on it. But yeah, no, there's like interesting blockchain stuff coming up now, like along the Fiber Time route. And then AI is just another fascinating thing to me, but more on the infrastructure side. So how these companies, these data centers are being set up, how they are getting land procurement deals within 6 months, and then building out their energy infrastructure within 4 months after that. And then just phoning up Eskom and saying, cool, just come connect us. And then they just have all the chips and the racks. So we're getting like proper NVIDIA chips now into Africa. Through Africa data centers. They've made deals with OpenAI and NVIDIA, so we're getting Hoppers, Blackwell, like everything. And that's going to be interesting because I'm hoping the bubble doesn't burst, because there's like a lot of money that has been plowed into that. They've raised capital from Stanlib, so it's a lot of people's pension money that has now gone into AI infrastructure. And these chips, as you know, they're depreciating assets. So if you're running them at 80%, for an extended period of time, their lifespan just like dies off. And so like I also want to know whether NVIDIA is selling like maintenance contracts alongside it, where you can like swap out your old ones for newer ones. I doubt that's happening. So there's a lot of like those kinds of stories where I think we figured out that AI isn't going to take everyone's jobs, but they're going to take all like the entry level jobs on like knowledge workers. So like legal associates, paralegals, all of those, like that research intensive kind of jobs, like that's going to start disappearing, and that's all going to be farmed out to like LLMs. But it's more in the infrastructure investment. Like I'm happy because we now getting grid hardening to support these data centers that need to be always on. So we're getting massive upgrades across the electricity grid in South Africa, which I mean, wow, finally, thank you. So there's a lot of good, but like it's those background stories.
I think now it's been around 300 days without the load
Something
shedding
like
now.
that, yes.
Yeah.
We are a functioning country, yay.
Yeah, so it seems like it's going to be like an exciting year for tech, like in 2026 in South Africa. But if you have to sum it up, right, how do you think it's going to turn out?
I think it's going to be a very positive year. I think there's going to be we're going to cut a lot of the fat. So I think on like education, we've kind of figured out that we can't just give kids digital tools. So I think there's going to be a lot more investment into like training teachers to better interact across these platforms and connect with their students. And then like building on top of that, you're going to have cheaper kind of hardware and better hardware coming out. There's a rumored, what was it, a $500 MacBook or $600 MacBook? So that will shake out to like a sub 10,000 Rand laptop, because you can pick up an M1 MacBook Air for like 10 grand now. So if we can bring that down to like 7,000 Rand and have really quality tools like circulating in the consumer space, I think that's going to be one of the biggest upgrades for our society, is cheap, good technology. And I think Q2, we're probably going to get quite a bit of that, especially on the smartphone side as well. I say that, but I know there's like the RAM crunch. So memory is just getting like super expensive because of the AI thing. So the prices should actually rise. But I think it's going to be a good year. It's going to be a good year for the strivers, where we know a little bit about tech. You have like the computer science guys coming out. You have the guys we're going to have university degrees now that are purely AI-driven degrees. And they're going to have the hardware in country, in the major African cities. They're going to have kind of cheap access, subsidized access to cutting-edge hardware. And I think that's where we're going to start to see another big innovation kind of wave just wash over the continent.
I saw an article, I think, on Wall Street Journal that just because of the sheer amount of the data that's coming from the AI space, like cloud storage is not keeping up. So now the trend that we are seeing is that, like your USB flashes, and your hard drives are making a comeback just to try, to keep up with the demand of the data that's coming out of AI. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have like good internet running through all of the homes, so then now you can have your network attached storage at home, and then have easy interface to that, where you have your own like private cloud that is running on your own home network. So like even if the internet goes down, you can still access it freely. So yeah, that's a big thing, and yeah, that feeds into that idea of we're gonna see a lot of pro level tools become accessible, and that's gonna it's gonna ignite something. I don't know what. I'm just excited to have quality hardware get into the hands of the people who can make a difference.
I really, really appreciate your time so much. I wish we had more time to talk more on this, because, like technology, like it doesn't end. There's always a new thing every single day. But I really appreciate your time and your insights, and the writing and the reporting that you do is really informative. And, like I wish that, like you continue to do this and, like inform us a lot. And I wish you well as we head into 2026. Thank you so much for your time, Lindsey.
But cool. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I love having these conversations.